It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, digging into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is the one and only Ben Kirby, and we're going to be discussing his brand new book, Preachers and Sneakers: Authenticity in an Age of For-Profit Faith and Wannabe Celebrities. Ben, it is truly an honor, sir. Welcome to the show.
The honor's mine as well, Sean. Thank you for having me, man.
Well, hey, I know the big thing with this book coming out is you are revealing who you are. So let's kick this off by having you share a bit of the Ben Kirby origin story for all of us meeting you for the first time in this talk today. What are two or three key things we need to know about you?
Sure. Well, it's nice to meet everybody. I'm originally from Louisiana. I went to undergrad in Arkansas. I was a Marine officer after undergrad, and then got out, became a business guy for a few years. Left that, went back to business school to get my MBA. And during my MBA is when I started this weird social media account that upset a lot of people. And that was in March of 2019. And the Instagram, for people that don't know, the Instagram account basically reposts pictures that pastors post of themselves preaching, and I put the price tag of their shoes next to it. And it blew up into this international discussion about the church's relationship to wealth and fame and celebrity and all that kind of stuff. And so I wrote a book about that, about not only the state of the church, but also some of the questions that came up as a part of the account. And, I'm just happy to talk about it and share with those who will listen.
And in terms of just the decision to create the Instagram profile, obviously it sounds like you didn't have a vision for this to be big or go viral. You just kind of did it on a whim.
Yeah, people create random social media accounts all the time trying to be funny or go viral or whatever. One Sunday morning after sleeping through church, was watching this worship band on YouTube and noticed the guy's sneakers and knew that they resold for a bunch of money. And for whatever reason, I'd never done that before, and I've never done it since. I have done it since, but I had never thought about this before in this way. But I decided to just make a video saying, "Hey, did you guys know that this guy's shoes are worth $800?" And I made a few videos doing that. Got encouraged to start an account focusing just on that kind of thing, and it blew up out of my control and um, went viral. And I have been kind of navigating and working through all that over the past 2 years or so, and it became something way bigger than anything I'd ever intended. To answer your question, yes.
So when something like this goes viral, it kind of takes on a life of its own. Like when did you have to make a decision of, okay, I go forward and keep doing something with this because there's something here. But I know you decided there was a point where like, oh, I can turn this into something good. I can use this influence for something positive. So like, when did you realize you had something and that actually could be kind of a powerful force, at least for opening up some important conversations?
Sure. I think probably 2 months into it, the first month was just this skyrocketing growth that I didn't do any ads. I didn't do any marketing really. I just kept posting the same thing that I had been posting. But then I started to get some really angry messages from uh, Christians. And then I got a lot of encouraging messages from different types of Christians. And then I got encouraging messages from atheists and agnostics, all these different types of people. And they all were telling me these stories about either they had been hurt by church or they were still actively involved with church, but felt like this was a really important issue. The issue being, you know, getting rich off of God or becoming a celebrity or building your own personal brand or using your platform for political gain, all those kind of things. Um, all of which I had no, like, I didn't want to be an activist for any of those things. I was just experiencing this viral moment. But after seeing everybody's passion about it and having some really tough conversations with some of the pastors and everything, I realized that there's a ton here. And the sneakers were just kind of like, the very tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're actually talking about. And so there was a couple weeks where I had some severe anxiety, people were really upset, and I didn't like upsetting people. Surprisingly enough, so I took a couple weeks off and came back and decided, look, for some reason either God is allowing this to happen or He's making this happen. And plenty of people will argue with me about that, but I believe He was in this, and so I just said, well, I'm going to try to do my best with what this is. And so I started raising money for charity, but also trying to get people on both sides to wrestle with, why do you feel so strongly about this? And why are you so angry one way or the other. And it caused some really good discussion. It caused some feelings to get hurt. Like, it was definitely messy, but overall, I think it caused people to start discussing some of these things in a way that maybe hadn't been done before.
Well, and in terms of divine destiny, it's definitely an interesting play. If we want to say this was where you were destined to end up, very unique space for God to have led you. In terms of kind of the story behind the book, like how did the discussion come about to turn the kind of the discussions that were happening into a book format? You know, I can tell you stories. I mean, I work in the Christian publishing space of books that came out of blog posts, books that came out of podcasts. This is the first time in my experience I've connected with a book that came out of a viral Instagram account. So, how did you go
Yeah.
from that to, wow, it'd be amazing if we had a book tied to this?
Right. I didn't think there was a book here for a long time because to me it was like, look, it's Instagram captions. It's kind of it's lived its life. It's going to go away. I'm not going to put too much stock in this. But I talked with a few people that I trust a lot, and both on a podcast and in private, and we started kind of fleshing out like, hey, here's why people are talking about this. It's not like, sure, you're funny. Sure, it's kind of an interesting dichotomy to display. Like, hey, this is a pastor and this is a $1,500 pair of shoes. That's inherently interesting. But all the deeper stuff, we were able to start crystallizing a bit. And so I couldn't have done it without a lot of help from people that, like my agent specifically, Jonathan Merritt. He really handheld me through creating the proposal and creating the outline to make it where it was something that would be beneficial for people. It's not self-help. Like, it doesn't ever in the book, I never claim to really have many of the answers, but it is a helpful guide to struggling with a lot of these things that we're thinking and not saying. And for maybe people are too scared to even say, which I have heard consistently. So, talking with people that I trusted that are a lot smarter than me, we were able to come up with an outline and say, "Oh yeah, I could write about these questions that come up all the time." And I started writing it in February of 20, and I'm finishing up my MBA program at the same time. I graduated my MBA program May of 20, and then I turned in the manuscript. The final manuscript got approved, I think, July of 20. So pretty quick
Wow,
process.
that's a fast turn for a book done by a traditional publisher. Usually, that's at least 18 months. So that's
Right,
a
and
quick
I didn't have the book written at the time. Like, I it was, trusting that I could write enough, based on that outline, and it ended up being something that, I think will be helpful. It's an easy read, it's not super dense. I'm not a theologian, I'm not really studied other than just reading my Bible, um, and so I'm hoping that people will read it and maybe have their feelings or concerns validated, and hopefully have their maybe eyes and perspective open to the other side of things.
I think one of the interesting things is as we, look at the content that you post on Instagram, as we see, what somebody's shoes cost or their outfit costs, whatever it might be, often it exceeds some of our mortgage payments, and it does bring up that discussion, is it okay to gain massive amounts of wealth from preaching or selling what I help sell and promote Christian books for a living. So there is revenue and income generated of selling
Mhm.
the gospel, if you will, if we want to paint it in such a plain way. But in terms of the conversations that you've been a part of, just because of the viral sensation that was this Instagram account, um, you know, I guess how I would ask this for you, like, what maybe where were you going into this, and as you interacted with people and the discussion kind of unfolded, like, did your position shift on whether it's problematic for people to profit off the gospel, or I'm just curious, like, about the journey of you wrestling with this as people have, I'm sure, drawn you into many different kinds of discussions on these topics.
Yeah, the reason the account blew up initially, I think, is because I was naive to a lot of things. I was posting one theme. I was something in me was annoyed or at least stirred about the tension that's caused by a worship leader or a pastor standing up there wearing shoes that are worth more than a lot of people's mortgage, and that was it. That was there was no more depth to it, and there was no more critique. I didn't know what the answers were, and didn't claim to. But after doing this for 2 years, I am at least aware of a whole heck of a lot more nuance around all these different individual situations. I do. Uh, so I've talked with plenty of these guys and understand that there's all these, like, for example, if you are some mega celebrity's personal pastor and they feel like you've helped them change their life, of course they're going to shower you with everything that they could possibly shower you with. And what's the right thing to do in that situation? Is it to say, nah, bro, I don't want people to think that I'm, profiting off the gospel, blah, blah, blah. Or is the right thing to do to accept the gift and be like, dude, thank you. Like, thank you for your generosity. So individual stuff like that I just had no idea was happening. I didn't know who most of these guys were. I didn't realize this culture existed. I grew up in the South. I understood like big kind of Texas mega churches, that kind of thing. I didn't understand about the whole like East Coast, West Coast type different form of mega church. And so I have a better understanding of that, and I have an appreciation for those people being human and trying to provide for their families and trying to do the best they can in a lot of instances. I do think at a macro level, though, it's still worth discussing the greater church economy, like the idea that you can get rich off of just being a pastor or a preacher, even if it's uh, divorced from getting a salary from the church. There's a pretty good cycle of things that you can do through your church that you're able to build pretty substantial wealth. And I just want to be the type of person that asks the question, like, does God care about that? Is there a point where God starts to care, like, hey, dude, you're really using the things that I said for people's eternity uh, to make a profit, like to use it as a business. We just had Holy Week, and on Monday he overturns the tables for the money changers and the livestock merchants, that kind of thing. It's not the exact same thing, but I think he does care about his church being used as a marketplace in some ways. And it's not a it's an imperfect problem. It's got an imperfect point. There is no, from what I've learned, there is no number or amount of people that's appropriate to have in your congregation or the amount of gifts that you can receive, that kind of thing. But I at least want us all to personally audit, like, hey, do I love this too much? Like, do I, even for me, like, I've got a big platform now. I get to talk to media people, and it feels good to have people say, hey, you're funny or you're interesting. I like the thing you did. I at least want to be the type of person that says, hey, like, how much of that, how much stock in that do I put, and how much stock do I put in our relationship with God, if you believe in God and that kind of thing.
Well, and I appreciate that you brought up that there are many circumstances where some of the things people have are gifts that they've received from other people. I work with a lot of high profile authors, and they might be wearing fancy shoes or have this really amazing bag. And if you get into a conversation, it's like, oh, I'm good friends with so and so. This is what they gave me for Christmas, or I spoke at this event, and this was what they gave us. So a lot of times, those things are definitely gifts. And in terms of individuals, I feel like each person has their own unique situation. Like you may see somebody who has wealth and they've got nice things and a nice house. But I know pastors who are quite well off who give a lot of their salary away. Like you don't, you have your perspective kind of like I would say from outside the aquarium. And if you get a chance to step inside the fishbowl or the aquarium and find out a little bit more about somebody's life, it might not be exactly what you think it is. So I think there is a bit of a nuanced perspective we can sometimes have in terms of the nice things people have and what they cost and what they're doing. There's always that issue of personal conviction, like what is God convicting them to do with the resources that they have, and also there's the whole challenge of having a platform and being part of a scene. There is a pressure and an expectation if you're of a certain level or you're rolling with a certain crowd that you're going to look this way, you're going to dress this way, you're going to quote unquote fit in
Mhm.
with everybody. So I feel like there's a lot of ways you could slice and dice that and wrestle with it. I feel like that's like a question we'll never answer until heaven fully of what is okay to have and keep, what's okay to give away, and that sort of a thing. So I'll lean on that. It's probably a personal conviction for how you should approach that. One of the interesting things we saw the past year, especially, is these high profile mega celebrities who suddenly came out as professing Christians. Obviously, Justin Bieber, Kanye West are probably the two that were most large and in the media in the past year. Um, how did those things work into some of the conversations you were having through your Instagram account? Because that was kind of a bizarre anomaly where we actually entered into this season where some of these mega celebrities were actually saying more Christian things than certain parts of the church. It was indeed a strange time.
Yeah, it helped me content-wise. I mean, it's an interesting, uh it was an interesting convergence of ideas, like, the biggest I mean, Kanye specifically, the biggest one of the biggest sneaker innovators in the world is now basically preaching in certain situations, and so the ultimate preacher and sneaker, came about when he started professing his faith. I think it's an interesting discussion because in any other situation, if you had a friend that had just came to Christ and he was super on fire for Jesus and wanted to tell everybody, I don't know if it would be the wisest thing to say, "Hey, dude, you should go on Joel Osteen's stage and preach what you believe about God." And that's what we did to Kanye, or that's what his people did for him. Um, and it brought up some interesting discussion. Is like, dude, do we should we care about how the message of Jesus, the message that we believe about Jesus, is portrayed to the outside world? Because I mean, he's probably one of the top 10 most influential people, at least in our country. And so he has immeasurable impact. Same with Bieber, who has immeasurable impact. And so it's just interesting thinking about the responsibilities that they have for the message and whether or not they're surrounded by people that can speak into that kind of thing. Because it's like very high risk now. So like if you're now you're claiming a faith, which I don't doubt their faith. I'm just saying that their platforms are so massive that to there's just a lot at stake. Kind of like the pastors that maybe are disgraced or fall out of grace, like their ministries erode in a lot of ways if it's all riding on them, if they're the brand. Um, so it has been an interesting thing because it also has forced non-believers to contend with how do I feel about this being in the mainstream? Like for the long time, I could just hate on this stuff, but now my favorite rapper in the world is saying he believes in Jesus, or my favorite singer, pop star, like uh, melody genius, is now hardcore about his faith in Jesus. How do I feel about that? What do I think about that? Like it caused, I think in a lot of ways it was good because it caused people to say, can Christianity be cool? And what Christianity is this? Is this a watered down version or is this the real thing? Are these guys being transformed by the real thing? Like, is this a publicity stunt? Like, I'm not saying it was. I'm just saying those are the questions that came up, at least for me. Um, so to your question, it was an interesting moment in history, and I think it at least gave me some good content.
Well, I'm certainly glad that it gave you some good content. I think the one thing that comes to mind is, in both of those cases, those are men who seemingly have anything and everything they could ever want, and yet there was still something lacking where faith in Jesus was the place they ended up. And so I feel like that's definitely interesting culturally. And in terms of putting somebody like whether we're talking about Justin or Kanye up on a stage in a church early on in their journey, I feel like there's always this nervousness of like, oh, we're putting them out too far in front too soon, or maybe they're going to say the wrong thing, or they're going to embarrass themselves or embarrass us. Yet, if we look at early Christians, people were out preaching and doing things immediately after getting saved, and so
That's true.
I
Yeah.
don't necessarily know that it's a bad thing that those guys got out front and were loud and proud and saying, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about now." Yeah, I feel like it maybe steps out of our normal boundaries of like, well, you must follow these 10 steps and then therefore you can go out and preach or get up in front of people. I feel like we have a box and a system that we want to push people through within the church quite often. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, generally speaking. But at the same time, man, if the spirit hits you or a conviction hits you to share and give your testimony, well, that's pretty interesting to me because it is actually the power of the testimony and sharing your story and really just being upfront and honest about how here's where I was. All of a sudden, God broke through, and there was this massive change that I can't explain other than Jesus, thank you. And this is what God can do for your life. I have a hard time criticizing somebody for that. Like, what more could we want somebody doing but getting up front and sharing their testimony and really just sharing how God transformed their life? And so, I feel like we have almost, we can have kind of an unwinnable standard, if you will, where you're damned if you get up front early and you're damned if you don't follow our process. So
Uh-huh.
I feel like somebody with that level of status who people want to put up front just because of their mega stars or that they could command an opportunity to speak. It puts us in a bizarre position because they're influenced because they've ascended to the very top of the entertainment cultural mountain. gives them a lot of sway and ability to step into these other mountains of culture, if you will, and just get opportunities to share. So definitely a weird and unique circumstance. I'm not sure that we're going to see more folks like Kanye and Justin rise to the top in 21 to get out front talking about their faith. I hope we will see
Hope
more of
so.
that
Yeah,
because the ability to influence culture is certainly there with people of just that level of star power, that level of character. So I'm eager to see what unfolds in both of those guys' stories. And I mean, you can always throw stones at somebody's house, but I will say, by and large, what I've seen from both of those guys is they've been walking out what they're doing for a quite a long term. You know, it wasn't something that was like it was like a flash in the pan one month, and the next month they were on to something else. So it'll be interesting to see what the long term fruit of those convictions are for both of those guys. Uh,
absolutely.
I'm a guy who works in marketing. I advise authors on how to, launch books and do social media and all kinds of different stuff. Probably one of the biggest, but one of the biggest difficulties in social media, especially Instagram, is we compare ourselves to everybody else in terms of marketing. I'm probably always trying to poke and provoke you that you have a problem or a deficiency in your life. Therefore, you must buy this book I'm trying to help somebody sell.
Sure.
But in terms of social media, envy, comparison, is it good to really try to get people to aspire towards something else, or are we somehow doing people a disservice because we think we're helping them to think they're never going to be good enough?
Yeah, that I mean, that's a huge question because there's, a lot of these things come back to heart and intent. I think it's the things that we don't think about that are more problematic to me than like, sure, like marketing a book that has been thought through and researched and said, hey, like, hey, if you have this specific problem, this dude has written the book to hopefully help you work through that problem. Isn't it as doesn't super sound that problematic to me. It's problematic to me if you basically name a whole sermon series after it and sell a bunch of books to your congregation, equating it to being a better follower of Jesus. But for my deal with social media is more on like a personal level, like when just like auditing why you post the things that you post. And I've had to do this countless times, looking back and saying, "Hey, did I post this vacation pic because I was super proud of us saving and getting to go on this amazing trip and we just like had the best time and we wanted people to be happy for us? Or did I post this in deep down because I want people to think my life's awesome or this awesome meal or this celebrity I got to hang out with?" I've done all these things, like me personally, and I've had to go back and really audit those things. And I think many Christians just don't even think about that. Like they just, hey, this is social media. This is what we do. I go on this cool vacation. I post about it. But at least I want people to think, hey, am I causing somebody to be dissatisfied with their life, or am I potentially stirring envy within somebody if I'm constantly posting pics of my dope cars, my cool vacations, and my awesome meals, or am I posting one pic for the one vacation I take a year because we're happy to be here and want people to share in that with us, like. Uh, there are no specific guidelines, but I do think that many of us don't even consider that, and it can cause other people to feel anxiety, depression, envy our lives. Envy is sin. Like if you're causing others to sin, that's should be a pretty big deal to you if you're a Christian. Um, so I write a little bit of that about that in the book. In the title, it's called "Registered Flex Offenders." Somebody said that in the comment section, and I thought it was hilarious because that's what people say now. It's like you're flexing. You're trying to show off either your clothes or your situation or your money or whatever. So yeah, I think that's an important thing for Christians. Got it. Like it's not the end of the world issue. It's not a primary issue by any means, but I do think that you should care about it if you're trying to if you're trying to display a life that is in line with what Jesus prioritizes. I think you should care about that.
Yeah, I think motivations and intentions are really important, and we can't always discern that. But I feel like that's something that people wanted to cancel last year's. Like, well, I don't care what your intentions were, or your motivations were for whatever it might be, and yet that's important. We need to be willing to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not out there doing stuff just to somehow make us all jealous. Maybe some of them are, but I don't necessarily know that that's everybody's intent. And
Sure.
I would say, by and large, too, people are fascinated with people that they look up to, people that they want to aspire to be like. So, in terms of what you're posting on your social media throughout the different channels of your platform, some of that is connecting with your tribe, the audience you've built. I mean, because we're all on social media, we're all influencers to some level to somebody. You know, we're sharing our lives with other people constantly,
Yeah.
day and night, these days. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. You know, maybe we have to check our hearts if we're becoming jealous about something that we see,
Right.
that maybe we might like to have that. But at the same time, you know, to be sharing with our fans and our friends what we're doing, that's just taking them along for the ride. So I guess if somebody's having a particular conviction about that, you're gonna have to pray about it and really see where your heart's at in it. I know for a lot of the stuff I do, like even as I get to work with some like big name celebrity preachers, sometimes I'll post photos when we're doing things and having meetings and they're at events. Other times I won't. And you know, I think early on when I was probably more excited about, I was like, I got to meet this person. It was such a big deal. And now I'm like, yeah, this kind of cheapens the moment. I'd rather just have a
Right.
nice dinner and hang out and just really focus on the conversation instead of always trying to get that Instagram photo or something like, because I feel like you get to a point where you always feel like you're trying to sell yourself or make yourself into some kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gets old. Like the veneer
Sure.
wears off. And you're like, yeah, let's just
And
move
that's
on.
born in wisdom, I think. You know, not every many people on the internet are unable to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I think that is a detriment
Right.
because so many of these things are
That's what makes the social and social media. It's
right.
the outrage and the comments back and forth.
Inability to be nuanced, and I frustrate a lot of people because there's oftentimes where I don't take a hard and fast stand on these things because I see elements to both sides. I can see why people would be upset at having a guy post his private jet pics every week, knowing that they're a pastor. But I can also see why, like you just said, like wanting to show people authenticity, show people like, hey, my life is actually happening. This is what's going on in my life. What do y'all think about this? Like driving engagement, building a community. All those are fine things, I think. And so uh, I've I'm agreeing with what you were saying in terms of like being wise about sometimes trying to develop my online persona does cheapen a real life moment that's probably better to stay in the moment. So I like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to that motivations and intentions, but also it's a stewardship aspect. You know, for you with what you do and stewarding and building a platform that has influence and can be a force for good. Just like me being a marketing and acquisitions guy, it's important for me to be seen with different people of a certain level in my industry. So, like, look, Sean rub shoulders with the right people. Clearly, it makes sense that he does what he does, and so you know, there's that experiential aspect of it, but there's also the portrayal socially online of that we're with the people we're supposed to be with. It's a weird challenge. I feel like it can sometimes be difficult to live that out well. But
Yeah. And I think what it comes down to is being secure in what you're choosing to do. Like if you are
right,
choosing to do that, have people around you that can speak into your life and if you that will be able to say, "Hey dude, it seems like you're really starting to brag about some of these things." Like that's what I want for everybody is to have a few people that can tell them the hard honest things to hopefully keep them in check and not let it get to it's like where your whole account is about everything you've ever done and about how great you are and how funny you are. Like, hopefully, people have a community around them that are able to say, "Hey, it seems like you really love people praising you or liking your photos or something. What's the deal with that?" That kind of thing.
yeah, surround yourself with people who are confident and brave enough to tell you the things that not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. We all need more
Absolutely.
people like that in our lives. In terms of your whole preachers and sneakers journey, what's the weirdest or strangest connection that came along in the process? Maybe somebody you never thought you'd connect with, or just something that was so out of the blue and strange, but yet it happened.
Yeah, plenty of things, especially the first year when it was popular, like more popular. Like one time, I connected with Questlove's assistant, so the drummer for Jimmy Fallon, Questlove. I mean, he's a musician, like he's huge. I mean, he's plays in the band The Roots. He wore one of my hoodies at a red carpet premiere for the movie Shaft, like the remake of the movie Shaft. Like just this I could have never formulated that ever in my social media strategy. That was cool and weird because I grew up playing drums, and so he was uh I I was a big fan of his. Other people like I mean, I've messaged with Rick Warren before, who's got the, like, second most translated book in the entire world. I've interacted with, uh, business, like, business people across the board, like musicians, Hollywood actors, comedians, like, everybody across industry has something to say about this kinda topic on both sides. Um and so it's been interesting, and it's been cool, and I like that aspect of it, and that's one of those things I have to check for myself. It's like, "Hey, you think it's pretty cool that you get to hang out with celebrities or that you have other celebrities in your phone, don't you?" And that's one of the things I have to constantly kinda repent of because it's like, that feels cool, and it's, uh, cool to have other celebrities think that I'm funny or that I'm doing something important, that kind of thing. So, yeah, plenty of weird random interactions and celebrities and that kinda stuff, but that's been fun.
And in terms of the account, your intent, like what's the biggest way you were misunderstood along the journey?
I appreciate the question. Probably the biggest overlying misunderstanding is that I have done this to shame pastors and to criticize them for making money, period. I think if you come to the account and have that assumption, you're gonna think I'm an a-hole. Like, you're gonna think that I'm a troll. And, if you spend much time on the account or listen to the podcast or whatever, you'll quickly realize, I think, that that's not my heart. But I think that's the biggest misconception is that I'm just trying to shame pastors. I'm trying to build my own clout on social media by talking down on people. Like, when in fact, like, if you look back at the account, I rarely make an indication one way or the other on the Instagram account. I talk more in depth in the book and on the podcast, but on the Instagram account, I keep it pretty in the middle because I don't want to be the type of person that's like, this is wrong no matter what. There are certain things to say that about, but not this. And so I think that's probably the biggest way I'm misunderstood.
Well, and I think that's just one of the interesting aspects of our hyper connectedness on the web. Just a surprise, I think, to folks that somebody would start calling out, "Hey, this person's shoes cost this much, or their outfit is like as much as a used car." Some places,
Yeah.
it's kind of an anomaly. It's fascinating, um, but I feel like maybe you challenge people in a way that they'd never been challenged for. Like, oh wow, somebody's telling people how much my stuff costs. I have to wrestle with because it puts pressure on the what I think is cool is you force people to have to wrestle with some of the choices they're making, and
Yeah.
maybe for people that responded negatively, you made them uncomfortable. Which, again,
Mm.
in all aspects of life, as we examine ourselves, being made uncomfortable is probably a good thing. The more we can examine ourselves, the better. In terms of the future of preachers and sneakers, the book is about to launch here. Like, what do you see down the road? Like, if you look back and maybe what your mission has been thus far and to where you see it going in the future, what's on the horizon the next 12 months from now?
My wife is asking the same thing. We're having our first kid 5 days before the book comes out, and so there's a lot of uncertainty here in the next few months that's coming. I mean, God willing, the certainty is that the baby will come and will be a dad. I'll be a dad while also being an author. I loved the writing process. I loved being able to write about this weird thing. I would feel honored to be able to write about something else down the line, maybe a comfier topic than church and money. Um, so that could be a possibility. My agent and I are working on a TV show pitch current about some of the same type of things. That would be like a dramedy that's still in development. If that got picked up, that would be sweet. Like, I love entertaining people. I love making people laugh. If I could do something that continues to do that, I would be very grateful. And if not, I without the Instagram account, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've had side hustles my entire life, and so would potentially buy a business or start a business if this stuff goes away overnight. So I got a lot of options, but nothing really. There's a ton of irons in the fire, but none of them are solidified yet.
Yes, nothing concrete to reveal just yet.
Just
Uh,
yet.
I'm fascinated just by the success you've had with the account and the book deal. Again, as somebody who works in publishing, I'm always amazed that it started with this and then it morphed into that.
Yeah.
My prayer, my hope is that you'll get to do something more in TV and just expand kind of the success and the influence of the brand you've created. I feel like it's had the ability to open up some important cultural conversations and the more we can keep wrestling with what we're doing in church faith and how that impacts culture, how we're received by culture, both inside and outside the church. I don't feel like we can have that discussion enough ever. So my prayer is that it keeps going and growing. In terms of
Thank you.
people connecting with you, finding out more about the book, connecting with your podcast, and just kind of keeping up with you.
Sure.
What are some of the places we have to be sure we're subscribed so we keep up with you all over the web?
Absolutely. So I have a creatively named podcast called the Preachers and Sneakers podcast that you can subscribe to on iTunes. And all the stuff I'm working on is at preachersnsneakers.com. So preachers, the letter N, and then the word sneakers.com. I do my I guess my most burning uh project coming up is the release of the book. And the book's called Preachers and Sneakers: Authenticity in an Age of For-Profit Faith and Wannabe Celebrities. It comes out April 27th. I'd love it if people pre-ordered on all the book retailers. And if not, pick it up on the 27th. And then, yeah, the social media accounts at Preachers and Sneakers. I'm always posting there. And yeah, I think that's plenty of content for the people if they're interested.
I think you hit all the important places we can discover you and connect with you. Like we do with every episode, we'll have links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Ben and pick up your very own copy of the new book. It's time to bring this episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Ben Kirby. Once again, our book today was Preachers and Sneakers: Authenticity in an Age of For-Profit Faith and Wannabe Celebrities. For more on Ben, the book, a great place to start is his website. Head over to preachernsneakers.com, and that is the letter N, preachersnsneakers.com. And Ben, I just want to say thank you for sharing with us. It's been a fascinating journey to learn more about how this whole crazy viral Instagram account spawned a book, maybe a movie someday or a TV series. Who knows? But thanks for sharing with us, man. It's been a blast.
Sean, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.